Position, but not respect. It can buy you medicine, but not health. It can buy you blood, but not life. It can buy you sex, but not love. So you see, money isn't everything. I tell you all this because I am your friend. And as your friend, I want to take away your pain and suffering. So send me all your money, and I will suffer for you. A truer friend than me you will never find. Cash only, please. We are going to spend 3 weeks talking about money. And I'll talk about why in a minute. Tonight, we're talking about some fundamental, foundational things about God and money. Next midweek, in 2 weeks, we'll be talking about the world's perspective about money versus God's perspective, kind of continuing what we talk about tonight. And then the third week, we'll get real practical. How much should I be giving? And I'm not going to tell you that. It's just to stimulate some thinking on our part. Let me ask you this. Why are we uncomfortable talking about money?
Because it's mine.
Because what?
Because it's mine.
Because it's mine, yeah, okay. What else? My wife says I don't hear very well, and I say what? So what else? Why? Huh? Okay, you feel like we never have enough? Wow.
Feels private.
Okay, it's private? Well, we'll talk about that concept more in a minute. We're kind of culturally, pretty much, yes.
Because we are greedy.
We're what? Greedy? Okay, we're greedy. There's an honest man. Yes.
We work hard.
Okay, we work hard for it. Yes. Yeah, a lot of different opinions and perspectives about it. Yes.
Not enough.
Not enough? Yeah, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to evaluate. You look at, the Bible talks about not having so little that we're basically bitter and curse God, or so much that we forget God. But where is that? Exactly. Yeah, great. Okay. Sometimes we're not grateful for what we have. Okay. Can be some guilt, like, I mean, we're going to talk about money. Okay, a couple more.
Yeah, sometimes there's ego or insecurity, depending on how much or how little we feel we make.
Yeah. It's just one more.
We feel that we're entitled to it, no matter how much we have, no matter how little we have.
Okay, we can definitely feel entitled. I think, one more. Go. Yeah. We are pretty much taught, at least I think, kind of as you pool our melting pot of American culture, that it is a private thing. I mean, I was taught by my father, you don't go into somebody's house and say, how much did this cost? How much do you make a year? When we lived in Texas, we were invited to visit the ranch of the family of a woman in the church there, a couple we were close to. And it was in central Texas, beautiful country, we knew it was a very large spread, very, big thing. Well, before we got there, the woman said to us, let me tell you, don't ask how many acres you have or how much cattle you have. And I said, I'm glad you told me that, because I think that would have been my first and second question. Just out of curiosity.
Right.
And she said, a rancher's wealth is the land and the cattle. So that's like going in somebody's home and saying, how much does your house cost? How much do you make a year? How much do you have in the bank? Right? I mean, those are, so I'm like, okay, I mean, that's glad to learn that culturally. So if you ever go to somebody's ranch in Texas, now you know. But Jesus talked a lot about money. 38 parables, 16 have to do with money or possessions. Almost half of them. 1 in 10 verses in the Gospels are about money. Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven and hell combined. So why should we talk about money? Well, because the Bible has a lot to say about it. And in many respects, it is connected to our hearts. And it's indicative of our hearts, of our values, just of a lot of things that are really important. You know, and money is not good or bad. It's what we do with it, how we use it, how we view it. That's some of the things we're going to talk about. This is a familiar parable. One of the many parables, as I said, that Jesus talks about money or possessions. And so he says in verse 13 of Luke 12, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" People recognized that Jesus was a very wise man, so they had all these questions. Somebody came along and said, make my brother give me what's mine. And Jesus said, well, that's not why I'm here. But verse 15, then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, build bigger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you've prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself but is not rich toward God." As I said, we're having 3 lessons, and I really volunteered. I felt like it's part of my role as a shepherd to do these midweek lessons. So, if it's Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm going to midweek right now. Last week the women, this week you, and tomorrow night Marsh Plains, and the next week the 2 women, and so forth. We've got 3 lessons to talk about, because this really is important. Tonight we're kind of laying a foundation, some basic concepts. I want to talk about 5 basic concepts from the scriptures about God and money. And then I want to tell a really personal story that I think will illustrate some of the things we're talking about. All right, here's the first concept. It all belongs to God. It all belongs to God. We get real possessive about what we have. Psalm 24. We're going to look at several passages in the Old Testament. You know, the New Testament Christians only had the Old Testament for quite a while. And sometimes we sell ourselves short when we don't know more about the Old Testament, and because the principles and concepts that God lays out. This is just one of many, many Psalms expressing this idea. David says, Psalm 24, verse 1, "The earth is the Lord and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. For he founded it upon the sea, established it upon the waters." Do we really think we are the owners of what we have? It belongs to God. Think about when you have a child, a kid, maybe a teenager or a preteen, and they start talking about what's mine. This is my room. Don't come in. It's my room. What do you want to say? Maybe you got to get yourself under control first. What's the reality of it? What's the reality of it? Did they pay the mortgage? If they're 12 years old, they're probably not paying you rent. It's not a bad idea, maybe, but maybe they don't. How would they do it? I mean, did they buy the furniture in there? I mean, there's a sense of possession, but it's not really theirs. have is not really ours. It's God. God owns everything. God has allowed us to have what we have. Maybe you were fortunate enough to get a great education or to have a great job that provides everything you need for your family and all that. Amen. Aren't there some things that you had nothing to do with about that? Why did I get to be born while I was born? What did I do about that? I mean, that's a concept in a lot of areas. It's God's. It's not mine. It's not yours. Your name may be on the bank account or on the checkbook, but it's God's. And this is the principle. You know the psalmist says in Psalm 50, God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. It's God's. But secondly, God has entrusted us to be stewards. What does that mean? What's a steward?
Caretaker.
Keeper? Manager? I'm sorry. Servant? Taking care of it? For somebody else, really. I mean, we are the stewards of what God allows us to have that belongs to Him. And this is a significant concept. Look at Leviticus now. Leviticus 25. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. You got it. Leviticus 25. And let me tell you the context. The Jews were brought out of Egypt, Moses and the plagues and all those things that happened. They go to settle the land of Canaan, which to them was a promised land. Now, did they take that land on their own?
Nope.
Absolutely not. Jericho, for example, the ridiculous plan of marching around it every day and 7 times on the 7th day and blowing trumpets. And I mean, that's God's plan, and it worked because of God. And so God says to them in Leviticus 25, verse 23, the land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine. But you are aliens and my tenants. Throughout the country that you hold as a possession, you must provide for the redemption of the land. Literally, every 50 years, the year of Jubilee, the property went back to the original owner. I don't know, a real estate agent's nightmare trying to figure out what's the value, how many years are left, and all that stuff. But God's saying, this is my land that you're living on to take care of. When you think about the parables, a lot of the parables involve the concept of the master entrusting to his servants money to be managed. When we talk about the parable of the talents, talent has come to mean to us ability, that kind of. Now, I know when Jesus said it, what did talent mean? It was money. It was an amount of money. That parable, the master held the servants accountable for what they did with that money. We are stewards of what God allows us to have. We are to manage it. Hopefully, when we feel like we're managing, doing something that belongs to somebody else, we're extra careful. Several years ago, Mary Lou and I we like to, have a little getaway for a week or so every summer, just the 2 of us, no kids, no grandkids, none of you, thank you. So we were trying to figure out where to go and where we could go cheaply. And my son-in-law, Anthony, at the time was working for a man, and somehow in a conversation, it came out that this man had a family house on Cape Cod. Now, some of you know Anthony. He is awesomely aggressive. Sometimes he says stuff, I'm like, I never in my lifetime would have said that, but he got away with it, and he got some results. It's awesome. It's an awesome trait, used in the right way, he convinced this man, whom we had never met, to let us stay rent-free in that house for a week. One of the brothers knew this man from the world years before, and he said, "You're kidding me. He never lets anybody stay in that house." I don't know what Anthony did. It was great, but I got to tell you, I was kind of nervous too. I don't know this guy. We're staying in his house. Please, Lord, don't let us break anything. Don't let anything go wrong. About midway through, I'm like, maybe it'd been worth it to stay in a motel. This is great, but oh man, I'm responsible for this. That's the feeling, not in a paranoid way, but we need to have about what God has entrusted to us. Whatever we have is from Him, and we are stewards. Do you view God as the owner, CEO, CFO of what He's given you, or kind of a consultant? You know, maybe you give a little bit, maybe even give 10% every Sunday, you know. There is a difference in our mindset. Okay. It belongs to God, number one. Number two, God's entrusted us to be stewards. Number three, we give to invest in the future. We give to invest in the future. Look at Matthew 6 in the Sermon on the Mount, another passage we're familiar with. Matthew 6. All right, you know, Jesus is saying a lot of different things in the Sermon on the Mount. Principles that are very, very significant, everyday principles, important principles. And here he says, verse 19, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." A couple of very, very significant principles. And the first one, what does he say about wealth, material things? What's the point he's making about it? Yes?
Investing more in things that are of the kingdom, things that are of God.
Okay. Yes, Neil. Temporary. Temporary. Insecure. Not permanent. Wow, not that long ago, you turned on the news and you saw those fires in California where hundreds and hundreds of homes, some of them extremely expensive homes, burned up, gone. Nothing people could do about it. And then, you know, a month later, some of the ones that didn't burn up, what happened? The mudslides took them because the vegetation was gone and the land couldn't contain the rain. It doesn't rain often in California, and when it does, it's just gully washers. I mean, it's temporary. Some of you have faced financial setbacks that you had absolutely no control over. Sometimes we get ourselves in messes. But sometimes there are things that happen in this world that show the temporary nature of things and of money. God never says those things are wrong. We're going to read the next verse about that. The rich young ruler had a problem not in being rich, but in his perspective about it, and his trust in it, and its value of it. Again, we'll see that in the next passage. So Jesus says, you know, you got to be careful. You got to put your investment in something good, something lasting. And that really is heaven. Okay, so he says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. We generally reverse this thinking. What do I mean? I need to get my heart right, then I can do the right thing. Don't we kind of think that way? And then there's certainly validity to that sometimes. Let me get my heart in the right place, and then I can give what I need to give, or whatever it is. Jesus reverses it. He said, where your treasure is, your heart's going to follow. Now, why is that? You know, that works, okay. Just a very, day-to-day example. If you had, $1,000 to invest in some kind of stock, and so maybe you've never, maybe you've not been involved in this anymore at all, ever before. So let's say you buy, I don't know, pick one, GM. It's not doing too great, I guess, but anyway. Okay, so now you got $1,000 in GM stock. What's going to happen now? You're going to watch it. You're going to start picking up in the newspaper, going online, and seeing, how's that doing? Am I up? Am I down? Oh, it's doing great. Oh, this is a bad day. Your interest follows. I don't mean interest that you're making. You know what I mean? Your attention follows. When we're investing in God and His church, and we'll talk about how that works next, we're just interested. When I'm investing in heaven, and we'll see again in a minute specifically how that works. You know, there was an old story when I was a kid, and obviously not a true story. These two guys died. One of them was very, very wealthy. Went to heaven. No, the other one first. Really very, very poverty-stricken guy his whole life. Went to heaven. Ended up in a huge mansion. Okay, the rich guy died. He got to heaven. He saw where the poor guy lived. He thought, wow, if he's got that, what's mine going to look like? Well, it was a little hut. What's this? That guy sent a lot up here already. This is about all you sent up here. I know that's silly, but it's the concept of investing in what matters.
Right.
And when you look at 1 Timothy 6, Paul explains, elaborates on what Jesus said. First Timothy 6. As you know, 1 Timothy is a lot of Paul's specific instructions to this young evangelist Timothy. And so he says to him in verse 17, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God. Isn't that just what Jesus said? Now, notice again, he doesn't say it's wrong to be rich. You need to give it all away. There's no value in being poor. There's no value in being rich. It's what we do. Now, Jesus does say, the more we have, the harder it can be sometimes because of how it gets our hearts. But what he says is, don't trust in it. Why? Because like Jesus said, it's temporary. And it's only in this life, John D. Rockefeller, when he passed away, was one of the richest men in the world. He was kind of the Bill Gates of his day. And somebody asked, wow, how much did he leave? Somebody else said, all of it. It's true. Yep. I mean, it's an old cliche. You can't take it with you. Paul says, put your hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. God wants us to enjoy life, to be fulfilled. But then he goes on, verse 18, command the rich. And you may say, well, that's certainly not me. That's a whole other thing we'll talk about because we're Americans. But he says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous, willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. When Jesus says, lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, what does he mean? I think he's talking about how we use what we have financially. And here Paul says, how do you lay up treasure as a firm foundation for the coming age? How do you invest in eternal future? By using what we have to do good, to be rich in good deeds, to be generous, willing to share. It's how we use what we have. That's God's principle. And I think also, as an aside, when we give to the church to advance the gospel, we are investing in the eternal destinies of a lot of people. When we give so that we put these young men and women on staff in the ministry to reach a lot more young men and women who are at a crucial time in life and deciding who they are and what they're going to do with their lives and all of that, we are trying to help people have an eternal future. And we'll talk more about the plans and dreams. Okay, let me talk about a couple more things and tell you a story. All right, so we've said it all belongs to God. God has entrusted us to be stewards. We give to invest in the future. Number 4, we give to God. You and I may write a church check to the New York City Church of Christ, but that is not what it's about. We're giving to God. And when I understand that, it changes my mindset. Now look back in Numbers 18. This is also a very, very biblical concept that Moses makes very clear. Numbers 18, verse 24. Let me set the stage of this. All right. When they got to the promised land, the land of Canaan, they divided it up among the tribes. Everybody got some territory except the Levites. They didn't get any territory. On that territory, the other tribes they had farms, they grew things to eat, and so forth. The Levites had what responsibility? The spiritual. They took care of the tabernacle, then they took care of the temple. They were sort of the guys in the full-time ministry, you'd say. Because they didn't have the ability to make a living, because they didn't have any land, God provided for them through the tithes that the Jewish people gave. They gave 10% to the Lord. The Lord didn't really need it. And he didn't really have a way to use it. When you read this verse, look at verse 24. When you begin in the last sentence in verse 23. They, the Levites, will receive no inheritance among the Israelites. Instead, I give to the Levites as their inheritance the tithes that the Israelites present as an offering to the Lord. That is why I said concerning them, they will have no inheritance among the Levites. Okay, think about this concept. I'm not sure it was, I don't know if it was, promoted that, hey, you're giving to the Levites. The reality was that people understood we're giving to God. What happens to it? The Levites take it to be supported. But the passage says what you're giving to God. It helps you and me to realize when we give on Sundays, we are giving to God. The church is kind of the Levites. You follow what I'm saying? If I just think about I'm giving to the church, I may be real up and down according to how happy I am things are going. And honestly, things are sometimes going better than others, and you may not always agree with how the money's used. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Somebody, and I think biblically, ultimately the elders decide we have so much, this is what we're going to do here and here and here, and you may or may not agree with all that sometimes. But it's God I'm supporting or giving to. It's God. That will change your perspective. The church is the literal recipient. You can make out a check to God and make it really big, and I don't think it'll get cashed. And I'm not being silly about this, but how do I give to God now? Support His church. And here's a couple of things about that. I do believe God will take care of it. I believe we need to be above board with stuff. I'll talk about that in a second as well. But I don't know. You know, I've been part of this fellowship more than 40 years. Now I understand that now, as an elder and as a member of the board, I am in a position to have some say with the collective group, not just by myself, of how the money is used. I understand that. But I haven't always been in that position. Most of the time over the years, I've had no say in what happened to it. And I guess, I don't think I'm just naive, but that never bothered me. Because I fear I'm giving to God. That's my responsibility to give to God. And I also believe if it's not handled right, God's going to take care of that. I've seen that happen in our world, but in the Bible. Remember Eli? Eli was a really, really good man, a priest. He had two sons who were awful, Hophni and Phinehas. They were taking the tithe and misusing it. They were eating what they were. I mean, you know, you read that in the 1 Samuel 4 or 5 along in there. They were taking, it's like somebody taking the church's money and not doing what they should with it. And you know what happened to them? They got killed.
Yep.
God dealt with them. God placed them in a battle. God knew it was going to happen. God said to Eli, your sons will not live through this battle because of what they're doing. Do you think God can't take care of things? Now, having said that, there is the other side of being responsible. You know, in 2 Corinthians 8-9, when Paul's talking about this big collection that's being taken for famine relief in Jerusalem, a lot of money. He said, we're sending a brother who's known by all the churches, respected. We don't know who he was. Paul says, we want things to be honest, not just in the sight of God, but in the sight of men. He wasn't talking about just appearances, but he's saying, look, we want things not just to be honest, but to look honest. You know what I mean? To be obviously honest. In our congregation, you know, we've got a budget sheet. I can definitely bring one and show you where it all comes from, where it all goes. Down to the dollar. But every year, more importantly, we have a very significant external audit. What does that mean? We have a top accounting firm who comes in, spends about a week going over all of our books, looking at everything. Is that a requirement of the IRS? No. We can keep our tax exempt status and not do that, at least so far. Is that a requirement of the state law under which we are chartered? No. Why do we do it? It costs a lot of money. We're trying to put young people on staff. It's about an intern and a half for the year. It's an expensive thing. But we want to be able for you to know somebody who knows stuff outside comes in and looks at it all. That's why I have all these procedures. Some of you on the count team, somebody counts it, somebody else does this, and some of that's to protect you. You know, the auditors are usually amazed at our volunteer system to collect money. How do you collect all that money and it gets to the bank and all that? Well, we got great disciples. We also have a system. What I'm saying to you is we want to do everything we can to make sure you know there's a transparency, whatever word you want to use. There are people looking at it that are not the people making the decisions about it. And there are just a lot of, if you turn in a check request, you got to get 17 people to sign it. It's not quite that bad, but again, that's a good thing to protect everybody. So we want you to know that, but I also think the deeper issue is it goes to God. It goes to God. I appreciate some of you when our church was going through a little challenging time and we were trying to figure out again, who are we and what does the Bible want us to be? You just kept giving because it went to God. All right, one more thing. Number 5. We hurt ourselves when we don't give generously. You know, talking about this used to kind of bother me. Like, is it right to emphasize that, you know, when God says, you know, do this and I'll do this for you? Well, God says it, so it must be right. Let me tell you. You know, there's something Jesus said that is not quoted in the gospel, but Paul quoted it. You know, in Acts 20, when they're talking about, Paul's talking to the elders in Ephesus, and he wants them to remember the poor. He said something a very famous saying. It's famous even in the world. It is more blessed to what? Give than receive. Jesus said there's a principle. God's going to bless you if you give. I do believe that. That doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to give and give 10% or 15% or 20% or whatever, and I'm just going to be rich. I don't know. I do believe God promises to take care of us. Again, you look at 2 Corinthians 9, in talking about money and giving, Paul says, you sow sparingly, what happens? You reap sparingly. You sow generously, bountifully, you reap bountifully. And he says, you know what? God's able to take care of you and give you everything you need when you're putting him first. That's a promise. You know, Luke 12, Jesus talks about giving. He says, give, and he's talking about money. And you'll receive, pressed down, running over. Here's my way I think. You know, you open a bag of potato chips, and you're like, what happened to the top half of the bag? There's nothing there. And Jesus said, you open the bag, and you put some more in, and you shake it, and you put some more in, and you shake it, and it's overflowing. That's when he talks about the bushel, the bag, that's the idea that God is saying, I'm going to take care of you when you put me first. That's Matthew 6. Seek first his kingdom, and he's talking about material things. Don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink. Now he's not saying, sit under a tree, God bless me. That's Thessalonians. You don't work, you don't eat. There's some principles that all go together. But he does say, I'm telling you, I appreciate our non-staff elders and the non-ministry staff compensation committee who has evaluated our staff salaries from time to time. I appreciate their concern that our ministers are able to live. Amen. I'm glad. It hasn't always been that way. I've been in the ministry for 44 years. I'm saying we always said everything we need. Amen. I taught this last week with one of my daughters in the room. I said, Angie, we had a lot less than you do sometimes. Didn't want you to be worried about it. I mean, many years we had no savings. We had nothing but week to week. God always took care of us. We had what we needed. Fortunately, we had parents who were somewhat affluent. They did a lot of things to help us. We didn't ask. We were grateful. Our kids had piano lessons and a lot of things that we couldn't afford to give them, but grandparents wanted to. Amen for grandparents. I'm trying to be a good one. I'm saying that to say, honestly, guys, I remember writing the checks, paying the bills with Matthew 6 open. And saying, it says here, seek first the kingdom. Okay, we're going to give what we need to give. This is going to all work out somehow. I'm not sure how. You know what? It always did. It always did. One more passage and then a story. Haggai 1. Okay, Haggai, Zephaniah, Zechariah, it's in there. Sometimes I have to just kind of start and say Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Nehemiah, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Haggai, there it was. Between Zephaniah and Zechariah, right? Haggai 1. Now I can't find it. There it is. Okay, here's the setting. After the Babylonian captivity, they started going back to Jerusalem, that area. They went back with the intention of building the temple, but they got sidetracked. And so God sends the prophet Haggai, and he says, verse 2, this is what the Lord Almighty says. These people say, the time has not yet come for the Lord's house to be built. That's like saying, I'd give more, but I can't yet. It's not the right time. because of this. Verse 3, then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? What's he talking about? Their priorities. They've taken care of themselves. Paneled houses, that was kind of the upper middle class, semi-affluent way to live. He said, you got yourself set up. But then look what he says, verse 5. This is almost kind of funny. Now this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. You've planted much, but have harvested little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. The more you work, the less you have. Have you noticed that? It's because I'm not blessing you. Verse 7, this is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. Go up into the mountains, bring down timber, build a house, so that I may take pleasure in it to be honored, says the Lord. You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away.
Wow.
Why? Declares the Lord Almighty. Because of my house, which remains in ruin, while each of you is busy with his own house. Therefore, because of you, the heavens have withheld the dew, the earth its crops. I call for drought on the fields, the mountains, the grain, the new wine, the oil, whatever the ground produces, on men and cattle, and on the labor of your hands. That's an intense passage, isn't it? God's not trying to be mean, vindictive, but he's saying, you're not putting me first. How can I bless you? I'm trying to teach you a lesson here. You know, I'm going to tell you a story as we conclude. There's a passage in Ecclesiastes 11:1. The old translation says, cast your bread on waters and it will return. It's this principle. Give. God's going to take care of you. Give. God's going to take care of you. I believe that. I've seen that. Many of us have seen that. Have seen things happen we couldn't orchestrate because we were trying to put God first with our lives and with our money. You know, my dad, as I mentioned before, you know, my grandson, who's a Christian, is the 9th generation Craig in a direct line to be in the Restoration Movement. I appreciate a lot of things about the heritage I had growing up in the Church of Christ. My dad was a really interesting man. In many ways, not a very good dad. And, you know, we had our discussions before he passed away. There was a time in which I felt kind of critical because I felt like he spent a lot of money. He wanted something, he bought it. And, you know, he was a widower. Kids were grown. I mean, I guess it was his to do what he wanted to. And then I realized something that I'd known, that he was also very generous with what he had. Very generous in giving to the church, in giving to Christian education, good causes. Okay, so a very educated man, had a doctorate in administrative education, was the academic dean of a college for a long time, retired early at 60 and had another career working for a nursing home chain. He worked for them about 25 years. It was a very large nursing home chain, more than 100 nursing homes. It was owned by a couple of men that had been his students many years before. And his initial role was kind of a chaplain for the whole chain. But he was really kind of a workaholic, and he developed that into a big job of a lot of public relations work, a lot of traveling on behalf of the nursing home, a lot of training of employees, a lot of incentive programs, just a really, really very responsible job, and one that he loved and he did well in. As he got older, he began to have some health issues, particularly some cognitive issues, and you know, my brother and sister and I am the oldest, but we began to get a little concerned about kind of where he was, and also, honestly, do we need to be thinking about the time when we need to help him financially? That's fine, we're children, we're ready to do that, but none of us are just rolling in money. We need to kind of know and plan and all that. And again, my dad, he never talked about money. I mean, he never talked about money. So we decided, we were in Nashville, we needed to talk to him. My wife said, I think you're afraid to talk to him. I said, you're absolutely right, I am. We just never talked about this before. He'd been telling me, your brother knows all about my finances. Well, I asked my brother. He said, I don't know anything about science. So we're like, okay. We went to breakfast at Cracker Barrel. My brother, sister, and I. I'm the oldest, but I appreciate my brother lived in the area. I appreciate that he was willing to be the spokesman. Thank you, David. Amen. So he started out really, my dad was past 80 then. He said, you know, you've been generous with us. We're not trying to find out about your business, but if we need to be preparing to take care of you, we're eager, willing, we just need to know. Well, the first thing my dad said was, well, you know, we don't have my 401k to worry about because I've given it all away and I had a great time doing it. I'm thinking, boy, this is going in a great direction.
Wow.
And so my brother said, so what is your plan? I'm just going to work till I fall over. Well, that's a great plan, but when you're in your 80s, that's kind of a shaky plan. You know? I mean, that may or may not happen. And as not too much time passed, he got more and more impaired and not really able to do his job. He would be, I mean, he lived in the area of 60 years more. He traveled all over the Mid-South area from nursing home to nursing home, and he started, had happening, he'd call my sister and say, I'm in my car, I don't know where I am, I don't know how to get home. My brother-in-law go get him. And so finally, I mean, they let me be the one to take his car away from him. But we hired, well, it was his money, but we arranged for him to have a driver 2 or 3 days a week, and he makes some of his rounds still, and basically he was just going in and out of nursing home rooms and saying hello. He really wasn't doing a job. He just wasn't able to do his job. And then we got concerned about that because he had a pretty good income from the nursing home and he wasn't able to do his job. And he really didn't have a supervisor. He didn't really have a boss. He worked independently for almost 25 years then. And so my sister, you know, felt concerned about this, and she contacted one of the high-up executives of the nursing home and went and said, do you know how impaired he is? He's receiving his full salary and he's really not able to do his job. And I said, we know. It's all right. We know. Now this is corporate America. This is corporate America. It got worse until not too long after that, we needed to move him to the nursing home. It was really bizarre. He was living in an upscale apartment complex that he had developed, and first person to live in, had been there more than 20 years, and it was connected to this nursing home where he worked, and it was just weird taking him over there. But, you know, it was expensive. I can't remember. I think it was $9,000 a month. It was pretty expensive. And insurance doesn't cover that. Medicaid will cover some places if you don't have anything anymore. And we're like, finally, in between there, my brother took his checkbook. And we found that his goal of giving it all away, he was getting there. He was giving hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month to a lot of different groups. You know, if you give to Habitat for Humanity, all of a sudden you're on 1,300 email, you know, mailing lists. Even if you give him $50 or $20, you get all this stuff. Anything that kind of he thought he agreed with, he'd give money to. And there were big amounts. There was a $10,000 withdrawal, an $8,000 withdrawal that we didn't know, still don't know where it went. He gave it to somebody. Now, it was his money. That wasn't the issue. But we didn't want him to be taken advantage of, and he was impaired. He wasn't aware of what he was doing. And in fact, when I was having to go through his apartment, I got a call. I answered the phone. It was some fundraiser. It's Dr. Craig there. I know, I'm his son. Well, I need to talk to him. He's behind in his commitment to us. And I'm like, he's impaired. He's in a nursing home. Well, is he going to make his commitment? I was getting angry.
Wow.
I just said
Wow.
he's impaired. He's in a nursing home. No. Okay, so now we get to, I mean, there's a little bit left, but he's given a lot of money. Again, it was his money, but it was a little scary. He was being taken advantage of. Okay, so we get to this $9,000 a month bill. The nursing home people, the head guy, said to my brother and sister and me, all right, we can't give him his full salary anymore. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay him every month what the nursing home costs, and then he can give it to us. And we're like, are you kidding me? This is corporate America, brothers. This is not a benevolent agency out just to help people. This is a very profitable, for-profit business. Why is that happening? Why did that happen? I believe because my father believed in the principle, you cast your bread on waters, it'll return. You seek first the kingdom, you're going to have what you need. At that time, he didn't even know any of this stuff. We were astounded. They said, we'll do this for a year, and then we'll evaluate. He ended up passing away after 10 months. But we just, you know, the top executive of the nursing home, we asked to, can't remember if he did a scripture or a prayer at the funeral. And I pulled him aside later, and I was kind of emotional. I said, Steve, we can't believe what you did. Paying him for several years when he wasn't able to work. And then this last year, when essentially this nursing home was free. And he kind of stopped. He was kind of embarrassed. He said, you know, look, Mickey Mantle, the last year he played baseball, had the worst year he ever had, made the most money he ever had. The Yankees paid him not for what he was then, but for what he'd been to the team. And that's the way you feel about your dad.
Amen.
I appreciate that.
Amen.
But I'm telling you, if you and I believe and practice God's principles, could we have walked in and said, you know what, he can't work anymore, but keep paying him?
No.
Could we have said, by the way, he's going to run out of money soon, so can this nursing home be free? We were astounded. That's not the way the world works.
No.
It's the way God works. It's God's principle. You may be hurting yourself financially. Why you can't get out of debt? Why this happened? Why that happened? Because your priorities are wrong. That's just something to think about. Okay, we need to stop. I've gone over 5 minutes. Let me just summarize this. Here's some basic fundamental concepts we're going to build on. It all belongs to God. God's entrusted us to be stewards. We give to invest in the future. We give to God. We hurt ourselves when we don't give generously. Let's pray. We need to say anything else, Russ? Okay, let me have a quick prayer. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you that you've given us so much. We can never outgive you. We can never show you our gratitude, even just for giving your son. Thank you for the brothers. I appreciate so much.